Let's install CentOS Linux 8.2. First thing you need to do is download the CentOS image, and I'm here in centos.org/download, and you have to decide whether you're going to get the entire image or install it as a stream. I'm going to be installing from an ISO image, and once you decide that, you have to decide what are you going to install for, what physical platform. I'm going to be doing this for x86-64, and that's what the bulk of you watching and listening to this will probably do. But if you have a different platform, you'll need to select that for your download. So I'm going to click on x86-64, and that's going to bring us to a list of mirrors that house the various ISO images for CentOS. I'm going to click the first one because this is near me. I know it. It usually works well, but select the best mirror for you. And we click on that, we'll see a bunch of options here. I'm going to download the entire ISO image. That's 7.7 gig. So if you have a slower internet connection, you may want to select the stream install, or you may want to select a minimal install. Minimal install just does server with console. It's good for things like running a web server or a singular process, and that's only a 1.6 gig download. But if you have the space and you have the time, grab the big ISO. That's what I'm going to grab here. So you click this link and download that entire ISO image. I've already downloaded that, and so a couple things to keep in mind. One, you will need 2 gigabytes of RAM, usually, for your virtual machine. 2, you're going to want to have a 2 gigahertz CPU. And 3, you're going to want 20 gigabytes of hard drive space. So you got to make sure you have those requirements. You could use whatever virtualization platform you want. I have some videos on KVM and on VirtualBox, and you can take a look at those whenever you want. But this video is just about installing CentOS. So whatever virtualization platform you use, you're going to want to start that installation, start that virtual machine, make sure that it's pointing to the ISO image for CentOS, and start up that virtual machine, and then you can go through the install. So I've done that already. And I'm actually running this in KVM. And when you first start it, it gives you the option to install CentOS or test the media and also troubleshoot. I'm just going to select install CentOS Linux 8. Okay, so I'll press enter for that, and that'll start up the installation. And by the way, sometimes I say CentOS and sometimes I say CentOS, and either one is acceptable. And here you can see it's booting up now. Booting programs, booting drivers. And we're at the initial welcome to CentOS Linux 8 screen. So let's do it. Let's do the installation. First thing is language. I'm selecting English, so everything's going to be English across the board during this install. We'll click continue for that. And that brings us to our installation summary screen, which is where we have to select everything we want and configure everything we want. So I selected English as my language, so the keyboard and the language support automatically is set to English, and that's good. Time and date, I'm set as New York time zone, and that is where I'm at. But if you had to change that, you could click on it and select a different time zone just by clicking it and clicking done. So this is a nice GUI installation. And fairly easy to use. So localization section is done. Now we'll go to the software section. For the installation source, I'm showing local media. Well, that's the ISO image that I grabbed. As long as your virtual machine is pointing to the ISO image properly, you should be in good shape. Software selection. By default, it says server with GUI, which is what we want. But let's click on that and take a look for a moment. Server with GUI means we can run this as a server. We could use it as a file server or web server or whatever, but it has a desktop interface or graphic user interface. So you have that more easy to use server, easy to navigate with the mouse. However, if you're going to be installing a real server in the field, you would do this as just server. an integrated, easy to manage server. And what that means is there's no desktop interface. It's just going to be the console. So you're working in text only, and you want that in the field. If you have less resources available to you on your hosting computer, then maybe you want to consider selecting this. You just won't have a desktop environment, which I rarely use in my courses and webinars. But if you want something more easy to use, easy to navigate, go with server with GUI. That's what I'm doing here, so that really we can combine two OSs together. This way I can show the server side and show everything in the terminal or the console, but I can also show the GUI side or the client side of CentOS. And then if you want a really basic install, you could do minimal install, which only installs very basic drivers and programs and gives you just basic functionality. And then you can just add on what you want, which is a great idea in today's servers. But for this training and for educational purposes, we're going to select server with GUI. And actually, we're leaving it as that, and we'll click done. So that's finished. Now we need to go to the system column. First is installation destination. And it says automatic partitioning is selected, but it's in red and there's an exclamation point here. So we're going to click that. And we're actually going to leave this as is. And we're going to leave the storage configuration as automatic. I'm not going to do any customized storage or changing of directories or anything like that, or any encryption of data. We're just going to leave it as the default and click done. That'll save that storage configuration, and then we get rid of the exclamation point and the red information. It just says automatic partitioning selected. That's fine for our purposes. Okay, we're going to leave kdump as enabled, but for network and host name, we need to configure this. So we'll click it now. And the first thing down at the bottom here is host name. Well, we don't want localhost.local domain. And let's go ahead and just change that. I'm going to change it to CentOS-server. So that's going to change the host name of our system. And this way, if you're running CentOS client as well, you can differentiate between the two. So change the name, CentOS-server, click apply. And our current host name is now CentOS-server. Okay, we have an Ethernet connection. This is a virtualized Ethernet connection called ENS3. It's disconnected right now though, so we need to enable that. So we'll click here to turn it on, and that will connect. Okay, and it found an IP address automatically within my virtualization system. Now, later, I'm going to change that to a static address. But for now, that's fine. This way, it found an IP address, and that's great. It can go out to the internet, grab more information, and do what it has to do, and communicate with the network and the internet because it found this through my virtualization system. Okay, if you want to configure it as static, you could do that now, right here in the configure button. And, you know, sometimes I would do that and change the IP version 4 settings and change it from DHCP to manual. But for now, I'll just leave it as DHCP since it grabbed that information automatically, and we'll click done. So now it says here wired ENS3 connected. Excellent. I'm not going to be using a security policy for this install. That gets a little bit more advanced, so we'll leave that alone. And that's it. Everything is good. The idea here is you don't want to have any red information. You don't want any exclamation points. You want to make sure everything is configured to your liking, and then you can go and begin the installation. Okay, so that's going to start copying files, creating files, installing, and we can set our user accounts while that's going on. All right. So first, root password. Well, it's not set right now. I want to set one right now. So I'll click on root, and the root account is the account that has full administrative access to the system. So I'm going to set a password right now for the root account and confirm it. Always remember to try to use strong passwords, and we're pretty strong here for this particular password I've selected. Make sure that you've typed it the same both times, otherwise it won't accept it, and click done. Okay, root password is set, And I want to create a user too, so that we have a basic user account to work with. So we'll click on that. And I'm just going to call it user. That's it. Keep it very simple. I do not want it to be an administrator, but I do want it to have a password. So select a strong password now and click done. So just using the account name user to keep things simple for this exercise. And click done for that. And the user called user will be created and the root password is set. That's it. All we have to do now is wait for all these 1,332 items to be installed, and then the installation will finish. So I'm going to step away from the video for a moment and be back in a little bit when it's done. Okay, so the installation is now complete. That took several minutes, so I stepped away for a little bit and paused the recording of the video, but it is now successfully installed, so we can reboot the system. And let's do that now. So one little failure there, so I want to take care of that at some point. But now we can select whether we want to boot from the system or do a rescue, and that automatically is booting from the system now. And I'm going to change over to full screen here. Give that a moment to complete booting. Okay, and once it boots, during the initial setup, it says, hey, the license is not accepted. Well, this is one of the greatest things that I like to do, is to take a look at the license and read it. Because in today's world, reading licenses can be life-threatening because it could take forever. But look at this license. Here's the CentOS 8 Linux EULA. Comes with no guarantees or warranties of any sorts, either written or implied. The distribution is released as a GPL version 2. You can read up more about that type of license agreement if you wish. Individual packages in the distribution come with their own licenses. And a copy of the license is also included in this media. And so here's basically the deal. You can use it. You can do what you want with it, but they're not guaranteeing anything. There's no warranty. Use it. Have a good time. I'm going to accept that license agreement because I do agree with it, and I've read it in its entirety. And I'll click done. So that's accepted, and now we can finish the configuration. Beautiful. That's going to start up the graphic interface and our login screen. Here's the user account that I created. I'm going to click on that now and type in the password and sign in. And there we go. Brings up our desktop environment. It says welcome. I do want to use English, so we're going to click next for that. And English for typing. I'm going to click next for that. Privacy. I'm going to turn location services off for now because I'm going to be using this as a server and I'm using it for testing purposes. I don't need location services at this point, but we could always turn that back on later. And click next. I don't want any online accounts right now, so I'm going to skip that. And that's it. Start using CentOS Linux. You'll have some videos here that you may want to watch for launching applications, switching tasks, and using windows and workspaces. And this is part of the GNOME desktop environment, which is what I like to use most of the time. But you could also use KDE or other environments, and you can change that during the installation process. I normally use GNOME during the my courses, and webinars, and so forth. So definitely take a look at these quick videos to see how to use these things if you haven't in the past. And you have some common tasks here as well, which are things you would do within the GUI, and GNOME help if you need additional help with how to use the GNOME desktop. So I'm going to close out of here right now. And this is it. This is your desktop. That's all there is. And so if you want to do anything, the best thing to do is to click on, is to press the super user key. So the super key, or Windows key if you're on a keyboard with the Windows key, and you'll get your options on the left here, and you'll have your search option here. All right. So a lot of times things I'll use the terminal. Open that up now. You'll See, I'm set up as user at CentOS-server. That's the name I gave it, right? So that's it for the installation. We're done here, but I'm going to show a couple more things if you want to stick around. I show a couple of configurations I like to use, and I'm going to change the IP address to static as well. Okay. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change the resolution here. I'm going to right click and go to display settings and change my resolution, make it a little bit bigger. Yeah, I'll go a little bit bigger, 1920 by 1080. And I'm going to scale it to 200% so everything's a little bit easier for everyone to see, and then click apply. That's much nicer. You can read that better, but it's really nice resolution as well. So we'll keep these changes. There we go. Now we're rocking. That's all I want to do here. Well, actually, there's something else. I'm going to go backwards. This has brought us directly to the settings section. When I right-clicked and went to display settings, it brought us into the settings. And so I'm going to go backwards one to the main list here. And I'm going to go down to power. And I'm going to deselect my blank screen. I'm going to turn that off. And I want to make sure that suspend is turned off as well. This way, if we're doing any work and we step away, the system won't go into a lock mode or into blank screen mode. And this way we don't have to log on again. And that's it. That's my config. I'm going to close out of here. Now everything's a little bit bigger. Actually, I'm sorry. I want to do one more config. And if you ever want to go to settings, click on the arrow up here in GNOME and go to the settings icon. That'll bring us back to where we were. And so I want to add something here. I'm going to go down to devices, click on that, and I'm going to go to keyboard. And one of the things I like to do is I like to have Control-Alt-T open up my terminal. And this really originated, I guess, with Ubuntu maybe. But I like that shortcut, and it just stuck with me. So I'm going to add that as a keyboard shortcut. And to do that, we can scroll all the way to the bottom and click on plus. I'm going to call this terminal. The command will be gnome-terminal. And this, so what that means is this shortcut key, once I create it, will open the terminal automatically. The name of that program is gnome-terminal. So we'll set the shortcut now and just press what we want. Control-Alt-T. There we go. Add that on. And now we have a custom shortcut here for terminal, Control-Alt-T. Now if I press Control-Alt-T, it brings up the terminal. Awesome. And quite often, for training purposes, I'll change the size of the font in the terminal. So I'll go to Edit, Preferences, and sometimes make it a little bit bigger. If I'm working with a lot of data, sometimes I'll make it smaller. But if I'm doing training, I might want to make it a little bigger, maybe 13 or 14. I've already increased the scaling of the display to 200%, but I'll increase this by one more. Let's take a look at that. That's pretty good. That's pretty big. We probably don't even need it to be that big, but there you have it. That's how you can change that. So another config that I would do. All right. If you're working in the system and you're logged on as user and you want to get access as root, you could do a su space dash. That's substitute user dash, press enter, and type in the password of the root account. And there we are. We're in now as root at CentOS-server. Awesome. The only other thing I really wanted to do is I wanted to change the IP address for this guy to static. Because right now we're getting an IP address automatically through the virtualization system. If you're working with actual servers, most of the time you'll set the IP address statically. Not all the time, but most of the time. So we don't have that right now. And there's a lot of ways to change the IP. I don't want to get too much in depth with it, but you could use the nmcli command, and you could do it in a variety of other ways. But seeing as how we're in the graphic environment, we could do it that way as well. We'll click on our drop-down arrow here, and we could go to Wired Connected. Click on that, and you'll see Wired Settings. You can also get to there from the Settings icon. So we'll click on Wired Settings. Okay. And for some reason that didn't come up automatically. It didn't bring me back to the settings window. But if you press that super key, or Windows key, if you have a Windows keyboard, Windows key, super key, you'll get all the open apps, you'll get your workspaces, and so on. And then you can just select what you want. Or we could have Alt-tabbed between those. All right, so anyways, we get to our wired settings here for our network settings. We're going to click on the sprocket here to make changes. You can see the IP version 4 address that I got. It's 10.0.2.166. I haven't actually tested that to see if it works, but we can test that really easily in the terminal by doing a ping example.com, and we're getting replies, which is all good. Control C to break out of there. And of course, you could have just opened up Firefox and gone to a website. That also would have tested it. Okay, but I don't want to have the IP address from the DHCP server that's built into the virtualization platform. I want to configure this myself statically. So I'm going to go to IP version 4 and change it to manual, and then specify what the address will be for this system. I am going to specify an address 10.0.2.54. That's what I'll be using in the webinar and so forth. But you can select something, and really it could be whatever you want, as long as the DHCP server within your virtualization platform has not handed out that IP address. You could even select what you're already using. If I go back to details, I'm on 166. Well, that's already been handed out, so I know it's not going to be handed out to anybody else. I could select that. So either way, I want to select .54 because that's what's in my documentation for the courses. So 10.0.2.54. And I'm using that IP network, and that's what VirtualBox will usually use by default. But you can use whatever IP network you want as long as your systems are communicating with each other and can access externally and get out to the internet. The net mask, that's going to be a /24 or 255.255.255.0. The gateway is for my virtualization system is 10.0.2.1. And you can have additional addresses if you want to. That's cool. DNS I also need to set up so we can have name resolution. That is also 10.0.2.1. And that's it. We'll apply this. Okay, and we're good. We'll close out of here and back in the terminal, clear the screen, and run an nmcli to see what we got. Okay, well, this is still set up as this. If we want the new address to take effect, we can either restart the system, or, and here's a little thing for you, you could do an nmcli and con down that connection, that network interface, which in this case is ENS3. So we down it, it says successfully deactivated, and then we can bring it back up. And now it's successfully activated. So what did I do? nmcli connection down ENS3 to deactivate the connection, and then nmcli con up to activate the connection on ENS3 again. Then if we run nmcli once more time, we'll see the new configuration. 10.0.2.54. Good stuff. And if we scroll down here, if we arrow down, we'll see the DNS server. It doesn't show the gateway address, but to see that, we could do an IP route, and it will show the default gateway address here. That's all configured properly, and I should be able to ping out to the internet. We'll do a ping example.com, and we're good. So now we have a statically configured IP address and gateway and DNS server that works. And that's it. I think that's all the configuration I want to do here. And that sums it up for this CentOS 8.2 installation. So go to work.